Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and on this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users, getting folks the answer they need from an employment attorney. Today, however, we're talking about a slightly belated news story, a current event, if you will, in employment law that I think is very important. Now, I'm going to provide a little context first. A lot of people will call up employment attorneys and say, oh, my freedom of speech is being impacted by my employer. There's a flaw with that. Unless your employer is the government, probably your freedom of speech does not protect you against your employer. This is because your freedom of speech rights are protected against government action, not against the actions of your employer, your private employer, right? And that is pretty routinely a source of angst and confusion for folks who are mad when they get fired for engaging in very free speech, right? Now, that's great, and that makes sense, or at least it did when the laws were drafted. But as it turns out, our nation, our economy, our government is shifting from the republic it was originally to something a little bit closer to an advanced form of oligarchy or some kind of corporate governance structure where, certain super PACs, certain lobbyist groups, certain large multinational corporations have a lot of say and sway over our governance, right? You can look at the military-industrial complex and just look at that and say, oh, okay, so very clearly we're in constant warfare because those corporations give money to politicians. I'm not necessarily speaking to any one conflict, but it just seems like, as long as I can remember, my entire adult life, since I graduated high school to today, we have had, at a minimum, one or more wars going the entire time. I suspect that is not because the people of the United States want those wars, at least certainly not all of them. I suspect it's because certain corporations need to sell bombs and missiles and bullets, right? Now, to address that, there's some growth in the law. Some. And we're going to get to that. Real quick though, let's pause for a moment and just acknowledge that New York State does have a law that bars your employer for going after you because of your political affiliation. This might shock you because in many folks' minds, New York State would be perhaps the first offender to go after you if you have an unsanctioned political affiliation, right? One that New Yorkers don't like. Now, this law was originally built to address unfairness in local government. What you would see in local government when this law was originally rolled out is that somebody would win a seat in local government and they would go in and fill all the local government positions with their friends who helped them get elected. And then when they would lose the next election, all their friends would be terminated. So there was no ability to count on your government job, and there was no continuity in government jobs because every time a new regime would come in, everybody would be fired, and the government wouldn't work very well because everybody had been fired, and so there was no one to stick around and be like, this is how we do things here, right? And that law has over time had some case law that built it out beyond that original purpose and provided protections in New York State for private employees as well. Now, it's not the most clear-cut protection, but it exists and it's there, and it can be very useful, and we've certainly used it in cases that I've worked on. Now, the new development in New York, Connecticut, and Maine, very New England, although I'm in Connecticut. I guess Connecticut is part of New England, and New York is not. And Maine certainly is, I believe. Technically. Although New Yorkers think they're part of New England, believe it or not. Just nobody in New England thinks that New York is part of New England. Anyways, because New Yorkers would say, well, we're all Yankees, right? Right, guys? We're all Yankees. And of course, the New Englanders are like, no, no, you're not one of us. It's a situation. Now, those three states, again, New York, Connecticut, and Maine, have rolled out captive audience statutes. And this is pretty important. So the idea here is, first off, these laws have to be posted, right? You have to have a sign up in your workplace to display your rights, the employee's rights under this law. And employees have a right to skip meetings that touch upon the employer's religious beliefs or political beliefs. It's pretty amazing, right? Now, it's not uncommon for employers to have rallies being like, okay, we think you should all vote for this candidate. That happens a lot. Now, unions also do that. And to my knowledge, there's no law against unions doing that. And that's a whole nother situation, because unions are right now experiencing a rapid transition from one political party to the other. Historically, they always voted blue. And now unions are becoming more split along blue-collar lines, where certain unions are voting red. And it's very complex. But the unions can do whatever they want, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think there's any limit upon the union activities pushing certain political beliefs. And I've never heard of a union pushing religious beliefs, so I don't know too much about that. But it is common for an employer to be like, hey, we need to have a meeting. You all need to vote for this candidate. And listen, sometimes it's like business. It's a business reason, right? Like, hey, this candidate said we're going to get into this war. And we sell, I don't know, we sell blood clot packages, like special blood clot bandages that save lives, right? And that war, we get into that war, we're going to sell a lot more of these blood clot bandages. So you all need to vote for this person. The way this law works is you could say, hey, you're having a meeting about who you feel we should vote for. I don't have to go to that. I don't have to attend that meeting. By the same token, if you're having a meeting like, we all believe that you can only blow your nose on Thursdays, it's part of our religious creed. I hope that's not, I'm not making fun of any actual faith, just to be clear. Let me turn up this light here a little bit. Okay, maybe that's better, maybe it's not. You don't have to attend that meeting. You don't have to go, right? The employer can say what they want to say. They can have the meeting. You don't have to go, and they can't punish you for not going. Right off the bat, people are going to be like, well, there's going to be retaliation if you don't go. Yeah, and there's some provisions to address retaliation in the law, but yes, it does create trouble for you, I'm sure, right? Now, we do have some definitions. Let's read the definitions, because this law is not, if you think about it, there's gray areas. Like, what is a religious belief? What is not a religious belief? How do you prove what is and is not a religious belief? Like, I believe many things. Are some of them motivated by my faith? Maybe, right? Like, but where's the line? And I'm not even trying to get into any of the big controversial religious topics. Like, we're just trying. I believe you should wash your hands every time you use the restroom. Great. That probably makes a lot of sense. That's a really good belief to hold. Now, that could also be a belief of your faith, right? There could be some cleanliness portion aspect to your faith where, like, oh, you got to wash your hands every time you touch the booty. You got to wash those hands before you leave, right? Like, listen, if that's a real tenet of a faith, like, I'm not making fun of that faith. My hat's off to that faith. Good advice. Well done. Good use of faith, right? But is that then, if you have a meeting about washing hands at a restaurant, is that part of the faith? Can the employees refuse to attend? And I would say to you, really depends on the presentation, right? Really depends on the presentation, right? And with all these things, these determinations are going to be very fact-driven, very specific. So we have some definitions here. Pertaining to religious matters would be defined as matters relating to religious belief, affiliation, and practice, and the decision to join or support any religious organization or association. Is that broad? Yes. But it does provide some additional verbiage, some additional guidance, right? We have a little bit more. A matter relating to religious belief. Does washing your hands relate to religious belief? If your religious belief is you have to wash your hands? Yeah. But I think you can probably argue that if you're having a meeting in a restaurant about washing your hands, it's probably got more to do with the health code department, right? The health department coming in and shutting your restaurant down than maybe it does with your religious beliefs, right? Like that, the employer can make an argument there, right? Now, political matters, and this is even more broad, are defined as matters relating to elections for political office, political parties, proposals to change legislation, proposals to change rules or regulations, proposals to change public policy, and the decisions to join or support any political party or political, civic, communal, fraternal, or labor organization. Okay, now that one's really interesting because look what they tacked on the back end there. The labor organization. That's really relevant to what's going on today. I've been washed out by the sun. Yes, I've been washed out by the sun. It is what it is. You don't come here for my face. So, okay. A lot of employers are having meetings requiring employees to attend, and they're having long-form meetings about why you should not join a given labor organization, a union that's coming in, say, for example. And these captive audience statutes protect the employees from having to attend those meetings. Now, they also obviously protect you from having to come hear about how you should come join the Gowanus Club or the Freemasons or whatever it is, right? The Elks Club. I don't know, whatever club you have near you. That's fine too. Those are the fraternal organizations, although I would say the use of the phrase fraternal, brotherly, already has gender issues. I already have questions about how the law was drafted. But obviously it can't be like you should join the Green Party or we're going to fire you, right? Those meetings are going to be off the table. You don't have to go to those. You don't have to join the civic society, whatever that would be, the society to clean up. I forgot the town. The town from Parks and Rec. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like those organizations. And listen, there's going to be some ministerial exemption, right? If you're running a parochial school, a religious school, you're going to have meetings that touch upon the tenets of the faith that you're teaching, right? Like that's going to happen. And there's going to be some level of tension there between the right for that school to engage in its faith and discuss its faith and this law. And there are exceptions under these statutes to deal with some of those situations, right? But if you're not a religious organization, an employer founded in some place because of its faith, for the ends of a faith, right? To further a faith, a church, religious schools, there's things of that nature. Then you are going to be subject to this law. Now, there's also going to be tension there because you're going to have hospitals, as we see in other cases in other fields. We have religious hospitals, hospitals meant to give as a mission for a faith to help people, right? There's tension there right off the bat because some of those religions don't believe in providing certain kinds of medical care. Would that hospital be subject to this law? I would argue they would. I would argue if a religiously founded hospital wanted to have a meeting discussing why you should definitely vote for such and such person or why you should definitely join certain faith if you want to keep working there, I would argue that those would fall under these statutes. Now, I don't know if there's case law on that yet, so it's me talking out of my whatever. But I would argue they would be subject, whereas like if you're forming a monk's hall, well, maybe listen. If the religious requirement is you can't talk from sun up to sundown in your monastery, okay, well that probably makes sense that you're going to have an employee meeting about like, hey, when you're here working between sun up and sundown, you don't talk. We don't talk, right? I get that. I get that. I understand that. And if you don't like that, I guess I would urge you to not work in a monastery. You know, so there's a tension there, but I think that this kind of law is important as we kind of understand that we don't just work in a political environment anymore. We're not just a republic anymore. Corporations are guiding elections more and more from both sides. This is not some kind of partisan attack. Like, as far as I can tell, both the major political parties are corporate owned and operated. Um, and these laws are going to be small measures to address that. Far too little. I could argue far too late. But it's something, and it's a step in the right direction, and that's exciting. And I'm excited about these captive audience statutes. And I want to see them sweep the nation. I want them to expand. I want them to be great and have positive effects and keep people from being forced to sit there and be indoctrinated with nonsense. Because, listen, we're all susceptible to being indoctrinated. Like, human beings are susceptible to propaganda. And us, me, you, all of us, right? Like, that's I'll get annoyed because people are like, oh, I think you're not understanding the effect that propaganda's had upon you. That's why you don't see things my way. It's like, okay. But you too, because we're both engaged in the human condition, so we're both susceptible to propaganda. And that's important to note, because being forced to go to these meetings and then being just attacked with propaganda, it can be detrimental. It can like really harm you and cause a lot of stress, and I mean, it could even impact how you think on certain topics, and it's probably not the best thing for any of us. So this is a very long-winded way of saying I love these laws and I hope you know about them, and now you can't even see me anymore, but that's all right. I don't matter. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Helps the channel to grow. I hope all is well. And I'll see you. I have a live stream tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Take care.